Welcome to O's Across the Pond, the show covering all things Baltimore Orioles, but from a fresh European perspective. Join us for the highs, the lows, the heartbreaks, and everything in between. Whether you're a die-hard fan or just discovering Birdland, this is your home for passionate, across-the-pond Orioles talk. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to O's Across the Pond. Thomas and myself are joined today by a special guest, Jacob Calvin Meyer, and the Orioles Beat Reporter from the renowned Baltimore Sun. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, guys. This is going to be fun.
Welcome, Jacob.
Fantastic. Well, before we start, we'd love it if you could give us a little whistle-stop tour of your career and how you find yourself in your current position at the Sun. Following an internship, many of us would envy, I believe, at the Babe Ruth Museum. So can you give us a bit of a whistle-stop?
Oh, wow, look at that. No, it's cool that you know that. Yeah, so I grew up in the Baltimore area, about 20 minutes west of Baltimore. Grew up an Orioles fan. My dad was a huge Orioles fan, and I went out to college in Western Pennsylvania, which is like an hour south of Pittsburgh. I went to a small school and was a very mediocre Division III baseball player, but proud of it. And I played there, majored in journalism, and got a job covering high school sports in Western PA. Did that for a little bit. Got another job doing high school sports in Eastern PA, again PA, Pennsylvania. And then I ended up getting a job at the Baltimore Sun doing high school sports. So I did high school sports for about 5-6 years, and then I got a job at the Washington Times in Washington, D.C., covering some of the professional teams down there, but I wasn't a traditional beat reporter. I kind of just hopped in and did stories on all of the teams down there, and then job opened up at the Sun, and I've been covering the Orioles for the Sun since 2023. And so Jim Palmer has joked with me in the past that maybe I was the magic sauce because I show up and they win 101 games. But this season is certainly proving that I have nothing. I had nothing to do with their prior success, and so. Yeah, but that's how I got to the Sun, and it's been an interesting 3 years, 3 very different seasons covering this team.
Yeah, tell us about it. I mean, the term beat reporter isn't one that's sort of used over here in the UK, as far as I'm aware. We have our bobbies on the beat. So what exactly does it mean, just for the uneducated amongst us, including myself?
Sure. Yeah. I guess the differentiating factor of just a typical sports reporter versus a beat reporter is somebody who's on, quote unquote, on the beat is somebody that is at the vast majority of home games and who also travels with the team at least in some form or fashion. So there's 2 Orioles beat reporters at the Sun. It's me and my partner Matt Wyrick. We split the road games in half. So he'll cover about 40 road games. I'll cover about 40, and then we're both at the vast majority of home games. And so I think baseball is an interesting sport because there are so many games, and you just never know what's going to happen on any particular day. And the players are there every day. The coaches are there every day. And so one of the ways that you can either gain some respect of players and coaches, or just is the fact that you're there. You're in the clubhouse every day. They see that you're traveling with the team. They see that you're asking questions, stuff like that. I would say that's probably the differentiating factor.
So obviously, as you said, Jacob, 3 very different seasons for the O's. But obviously, looking at this season, the O's for 2025, what would you say has been the biggest surprise so far?
Gosh, the easy answer
Good
is
or
just
bad?
I mean, yeah, there's not much good, sadly. I think the easy answer is just the general how bad they've been overall. If I had to pinpoint one thing that has been most surprising for me is the fact that the offense has struggled the way that it has. The starting rotation has gained a lot of attention, and understandably so, because that was seen as this team's weakness in 23, even in 24 when they had Corbin Burns going into the offseason with the assumption that Corbin Burns would be gone in 25. That's what everybody was saying, that, GM Mike Elias needs to invest in the rotation. And so when the starting pitching was as bad as it was in April, that was a massive focus on why this team was struggling. But I guess in hindsight, it felt this way in the moment, but in hindsight, now that this has kind of bled into May, and I look at why this team isn't performing well, injuries make up a big portion of that pie. But I would say that the most surprising part is the fact that um, I expected Adley Rutschman to get back on track this season. That hasn't exactly happened in terms of the kind of the overall numbers. There are a bunch of guys that are struggling offensively. Heston Kjerstad, Ryan Mountcastle. I think both of those guys have OPSs in the 500s. That's certainly surprising. And so when I went out at the beginning of the season, I'm just I'm sort of a pessimist at heart. I I was I didn't expect the 23 team to be as good. I correctly guessed that the 24 team would regress a little bit. They won 91 games. I think I predicted that they would win 88. And I was optimistic about this team, which, shows how wrong I was. I was optimistic on this team because I thought the offense would be that good, that it would overcome some bad pitching. I thought that this would be a top 3 offense in baseball. I thought they would score over 800 runs. And so that's been the most surprising part. I think the injuries play a massive role in that, but there are still some individual performances that have been kind of shocking.
Yeah, I agree. I thought, I'd been thoroughly disappointed with Adley Rutschman. Obviously, it's well talked about since post All-Star break last season. Ryan Mountcastle has been a massive disappointment for me. I managed to watch all the game last night. I think I managed to go to sleep 3 a.m. UK time by the time everything was wrapped up. There was an improvement last night from Ryan Mountcastle. I've been vocal about him. Where if I'm pitching to Ryan Mountcastle, no matter what the count is, if he is on 2 strikes, I am pitching him something low and away. That has been the trend. That's the pitch that's going to get him out. He is just looks like he is swatting at something. I just hopefully with the bit of an upturn last night, Mountcastle can keep it on. Obviously, Adley Rushman's dealing with. Uh, is it a concussion? Have they come out and said anything, or is there any exclusive that you can give us with Adley?
No, they haven't come out and said anything. My guess is that he's going to be okay, because at this point you would have thought that they put him on the IL, but they're being very, especially now that they've changed managers. The new skipper is being even more guarded with his injury comments. He really has his phrases that he's being given to say, and he's repeating them, which is fine. You'd expect. He's got a lot. Tony's really great. He was great to talk with when he was the third base coach and the infield coach. He's been put in an impossible situation. But yeah, with Rutschman and Mounting, like, I'm not as concerned, I guess, about Rutschman, because the underlying numbers, if you go to his baseball savant page, if you look at the expected stats, it does suggest that there's going to be some regression here. I know fans hate hearing that, because it's like, man, we've passed Memorial Day. We're about to hit June, and Adley's hitting 200 with a 650 OPS. At some point we can't keep looking at the underlying numbers, but at the end of the day, I think he's walking 13% of the time and striking out 15% of the time. Like, those are pretty elite numbers. I think he's going to be okay. I think at the end of the 23 season, or midway through 24, I think people were saying, oh, maybe Adley Rutschman's taking a step and he can be a 27 home run type of guy with plus defense. Now it's looking like, man, I just want Adley to get back to hitting doubles and having a 750 OPS, and that would be a massive success. Now he's more concerning, because it's like, you've seen the home run numbers dip year after year. He's the type of hitter, he's always going to whiff at those low and away sliders. Like, it's just going to happen. The difference is that, and I hate to make this the point, but like, once he started dealing with the vertigo stuff in like the middle of 23, before then, if you threw him a cookie down the middle, like, he would crush it. And he's just not crushing those pitches right now. And maybe he is getting back on track. He has looked better too. I think it was 2 opposite field doubles last night, and so that was good. But yeah, that's a concerning aspect for them.
So obviously we've talked about Adley and Mountcastle struggling. Who do you think is? Who would you say is having a breakout season that fans aren't necessarily talking about enough?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, fans are talking about Jackson Holiday, right? He's having a good season. He's now leading off for them. He's looked excellent over the past really month since he sort of made a swing change. He's been so like late last season, Holiday went from that big leg kick in his swing, like the Bryce Harper-esque leg kick, um, and then he went to a toe tap, which helps him sort of, if you just imagine if you're a left-handed hitter, your right foot, he's just going back, tapping it, and then moving forward. It allows him to stay on balance throughout his swing and his head's not moving as much, and that was a big change for him. What he's done the past few months is kind of focused on where his hands are, and he's been moving them all about. And a month ago, it seems like he's kind of settled on having his hands just a little bit farther away from his body, and he's been hitting great. But obviously, everybody knows that he's been stellar this season. Up until last night, I probably would have said Brian Baker, right? During spring
Yeah.
training, there were a lot of fans who were like frustrated with the fact that Brian Baker might be an option for the opening day roster because he had a tough 2024 season. He really struggled in the postseason in 23. Um, but he's made some changes to his delivery and his changeup grip that have made him, one of the more valuable pitchers on this team. It was a tough night last night, but a lot of the guys in this pen are being put in impossible situations. I think for Baker and Soto last night, that was their fifth time pitching in 7 days. There's no way, there's no reliever in baseball that can pitch 5 times in 7 days and all of those outings be good. And so that's just the way that it goes. And so I probably would say Baker, but at this point, the team's so bad that it's like the breakout guys are Sagano and Holiday, and those are like the obvious ones. There just aren't that many guys that you can look at and say, hey, this guy's playing really well, but it's a little bit under the radar because, what are they, 19 and 35?
You mentioned Soto last night. One thing I saw, I mean, do you think he was pulled too early last night, Soto? Do you think he could have got one more out? Do you think it was the right time to pull him, or do you think they could have waited? Because I thought he came up clutch massively in the, what was it, the top of the seventh, was it?
I think it might have been the sixth. Did he follow Sagano and then Aiken pitched the seventh? The tough
Yeah,
thing,
sorry.
yeah, no, it's always hard. It's always hard to remember these things. The the thing that's tough with that is again he had pitched so often that it's like, are you really going to push him to go another inning, another batter? So they followed him up with Aiken because there were a lot of left-handers in the lineup, and so I think that decision was fine. I think some of the ones earlier this weekend in Boston, sort of surprised me. Like, I don't know how much you guys watched that series, but Manzolino not intentionally walking Rafael Devers got everybody in a tizzy. And yeah, like I get it. But the thing that I think some people miss is that sometimes decisions that you make as a manager in the sixth or seventh inning, they unlock a chain of reaction that forces you to do that. So I don't want to defend the Devers decision because I don't want people, with pitchforks outside of my house or whatever. But to give them some grace and some understanding, I think that there were mistakes made earlier that game that led them up to that decision. So it's game one of a doubleheader. You can't pitch a relief pitcher twice in one day, right? If you use a reliever in game one, he cannot pitch in game two. That would just be managerial malpractice. It would not be safe for the pitcher to do that. So they used 5 relievers in that game. So Soto was the 5th reliever to pitch in that game. You only have 8 guys in the bullpen. You put yourself in a position where Soto had to get those outs. You bring him in versus lefties. At that point, would you rather have Soto left on left against Devers or Soto have to get 2 outs both against righties? Or do you bring in Kittredge, who's your 6th reliever that day? So my point is that you could have gone back in time and had Brian Baker throw 2 innings there
Mm.
or Cano get 5 outs, and then it would have only been, it would have been a situation where you wouldn't have forced yourself to say, oh, Soto has to get these guys out. And so the bullpen decisions are something that fans were really mad at Brandon Hyde about. At the end of the day, he was very consistent with the way he handled his bullpen. People can get mad at that, but there was intellectual consistency there. I think we're seeing some, challenging or learning from Manzolino about how he's handling his bullpen so far.
I agree. I agree, and that's a really really insightful look there for us to ponder over. I wonder as well, with the Sun sort of renowned for its in-depth journalism, sort of like that broader sheet approach where you're going into more detail. So I'm anticipating that you spend quite a lot of time looking at the farm system, and going from having one of the best farm systems in MLB in relatively recent history. I think you'll correct me if I'm wrong, no doubt, that we're now around 15th. Um, what do you think is the sort of reasons behind that drop off? And also, are there one or two players that maybe we should keep our eye out for that we may not, may not know about?
Yep. So the drop off is natural and what should be expected because when you graduate, Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Anderson, Jackson Holliday, Jordan Westburg, Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, et cetera, all top 100 guys. Kobe Mayo, I guess he hasn't graduated quite yet. But when you do that, there's just no way to restock the farm system in a short amount of time.
Hmm.
Now, this is going to be helped by the team being bad this season, so they're going to have a good draft pick in 2026. I think if I had to guess, the theory of Mike Elias has talked about making this a sustainable winning product, and the only way that you can do it is to when you do have the draft capital that you have to hit. And so, for example, this upcoming draft, um, right, like let's say they're middle of the pack with their farm system, and whenever they graduate Basayo and Mayo, that might take a hit. But this upcoming draft, I think they have 3 picks inside the top 33 or something like that because they got compensatory picks for losing Corbin Burns and losing Anthony Santander. And so I think they have 3 of the first 35, and then I think they have like 5 of the first 70 or something like that. That's an opportunity there that you can really get some studs in that draft and then rebuild the farm system. If you look ahead to the 2026 draft, which I know nobody wants to do at this point because this team is supposed to be good, and so we shouldn't be caring about the draft, but that's not the situation they're in. The Orioles could have, firstly, there's a chance that the Orioles are going to have an opportunity of getting the first overall pick because now it's a lottery system. And then they're going to have uh, the competitive balance round A pick, which is essentially another first round pick. They could get, if they don't trade these guys at the deadline, they could get comp picks for Zach Eflin. If they give them the qualifying offer, which is like a $20 million 1-year offer before they hit free agency, they could get comp picks for Eflin and Sagano and O'Hearn and Mullins. Then they could have 8 of the first 85 picks in the 2026 draft. So that's the way that they can rebuild this farm system. I know that they would prefer that they can win at the same time as doing that. And to give you a couple of names on the farm that are intriguing, Braxton Bragg is one that has really popped onto the scene this year. He started the year in Delmarva. He's a 2023 draftee, not even a particularly high pick, not even a top 30 prospect on MLB Pipeline or Baseball America. He killed it in Delmarva. They after like 2 or 3 starts, they pushed him up to high A. He killed it in high A, and they pushed him up to Bowie, or rather Chesapeake, double A. And that's the quickest that they've moved any pitcher in their system since Mike Elias took over. He's a college pitcher, so he's already 24, 25 years old. It would not surprise me if he gets to AAA this season, which would be very fast. And it wouldn't surprise me if by next year, that's a guy that we see starting games for the Orioles in a spot start situation. The second name is Austin Overn. He's an outfielder they drafted in 2023. They have a bunch of these outfielders who are very fast, good defenders, but the hit tool is a little bit of a question mark. Enrique Bradfield, first round pick in 23. The power is the question for him, but he's a plus defender in center and one of the fastest players in the minors. Vance Honeycutt in 24, first round pick. Also, the question with him, he's got great power, but is he going to be able to put the bat on the ball? But Austin Overn is a similar type of player in that really fast, great outfield defense. The if you guys are familiar with Fangraphs, I really respect the person over there that does their prospect rankings. His name is Eric Longenhagen, and I respect him because there's not a lot of herding in terms of so if you look at all the prospect lists with The Athletic and Baseball America and MLB Pipeline, there's a lot of similarities there. Kind of feels like polling. You know how these pollsters they do political polling. It's a little too similar. It's almost like they're putting their thumb on the scale, or they don't want to go out on a limb and be wrong with their polls. The guy at Fangraphs doesn't do that in my mind, and he has Austin Overn as the fourth best prospect in the Orioles system. The other lists have Overn as the 30th best prospect in the system. I look at, and this is a comp that I nobody has told me this comp, and so this is just what I see. I see a little bit of Brett Gardner. I don't know if you guys remember him. He was a Yankees outfielder, like, maybe 2008 to 2017. Just a really gritty player with a pretty powerful left-handed swing, and could pull the ball over the fence to the pull side, and was a really good defensive outfielder. Austin Overn is a guy that I'm pretty high on in terms of the outfield. I don't think people are really looking at him a ton.
Oh, it's fascinating. No, thanks for the tips. We're putting £10 on them being a starter for the Orioles in those years. Yeah, we've made a note. So thanks for that. I just want to touch as well on obviously some of these prospects coming through that not everyone sticks, and that's part of the fascination, I think, with baseball. Certainly for me, that there's a lot of hype around a lot of players, and you're willing them to do well. Of course, you are when they're your team. I tipped Heston Kjerstad to knock it out of the park, literally and figuratively, this season, and it's coming back to bite me a little bit. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but he sometimes looks scared at the plate, I feel, and it's just not quite clicking. And he got a little bit of leeway, I think, at the beginning of the season when we're saying he needed a run in the team, we need to see it over a longer sample size. And there's been little signs, but it's not quite got there. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. Bearing in mind you have to spend time on the same bus as these guys and in the same aeroplane and everything else. But I know you speak as freely as you can.
Yeah, listen, I was just looking it up. Um, I went and looked at Anthony Santander's numbers this year. I don't know if you guys have seen. He's off to an awful start. He's always
Mm,
been a slow starter, but this is as bad as it's ever been for him. If the Orioles had re-signed him, the only hitter on the Orioles that would have had a worse wins above replacement number than Santander is Heston Kjerstad. Those two
interesting.
those two guys have been equally as bad so far this season. Kjerstad is tough because before this season, anytime he had truly gotten an opportunity, he had really hit well.
Mm,
And I think you could have reasonably expected him to do that again in a larger sample size this season. The easy answer here is baseball is extremely freaking difficult. And like, this is just not easy to do. And um, the more kind of granular answers for him is, if you've noticed, he gets hit by a lot of pitches. And the reason for that is his weakness in his swing is under his hands, which is pretty common for a left-handed hitter. You want to get fastballs up under their hands. So like in the strike zone, but inside to a lefty, because they have a tough time hitting those pitches. He in particular has a really difficult time hitting fastballs that are middle of the plate, inside and above. If it's low and in, he can get there, but up and in, he's really struggling, and that's why he's getting hit a lot, and he's grounding into a lot of double plays.
mm,
And I also think that there might be a people talk about if you have a struggling hitter, that they take their struggles at the plate into the field with them, and that they might make an error because they're struggling at the plate and they're mentally not with it. I think it can work in the inverse too, in that Heston Kjerstad for half of the game is being asked to play corner outfield, and all of the metrics show that as of right now he's not a good defensive outfielder, and that can weigh on you to be asked to do something that frequently that you might just not be very good at. And so I think I think there might be some confidence issues there as well. I would still put my money on, not literally, I can't bet. I would put my confidence uh, in Heston Kjerstad getting back on track this season. It would not shock me if when Calder, Laureano, Westberg get healthy, that they might send Kjerstad down for a couple weeks to AAA to get him back on track. But listen, you look at how well Kyle Stowers is playing for Miami, and I don't think we'd have enough time to delve into that trade and all of the discourse around it. But they picked Heston Kjerstad over Kyle Stowers. They need to give Heston Kjerstad a chance here. DH is the best opportunity to do it. I don't know exactly how they're going to find that opportunity, but they need to figure this out because you cannot take a player number 2 overall, keep him instead of trading him when there were teams that probably would have given you something significant in exchange for Kjerstad, and then allow him to just become a platoon player or even a bench player.
Oh.
They need to figure this out. And I don't know how they get out of it, but Kerstead has enough of a track record of being a great minor league hitter and even being good in the big leagues that I'm confident that he'll figure it out. The question is just how long is it going to take?
That leads us on to a little section about front office and strategy. So we've been, and me personally, I've been critical of Mike Elias this season and the work he did in the off season. Obviously, the deals for Charlie Morton stands out. However, he did some good stuff. I'm a massive fan of Tommy Segano. How would you evaluate Mike Elias' performance overall, and then obviously taking into account the poor start to this season?
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, when you are the top person of any organization and your organization is failing to this degree and underperforming expectations, you're going to take the heat. It's no different than anything else. If the CEO of Walmart oversees Walmart's worst quarter or worst year in but this might be the worst season in the most disappointing season in Orioles history. And so, despite the fact that Mike Elias has a pretty long track record of being a very smart baseball executive and doing a lot of good things here, that does not mean that he is that he doesn't deserve to be criticized for the failures of this team. At the end of the day, that is his responsibility, and he has acknowledged that publicly. I think what makes it difficult, and I think what a lot of people who are maybe being hypercritical of Mike that they're missing or they're conveniently ignoring is that this is not as black and white as I think most people think it is. Um, the 2024 deadline, he made the best starting pitching acquisition at the 2024 deadline in Major League Baseball. He acquired Zach Eflin. That was the best starting pitching acquisition. He also made the worst in Trevor Rogers. Now, Rogers could get back on track. I think he will actually. He looked outstanding in Boston. I think that is for real. I expect him to come back up this weekend against the White Sox and start. But as of right now, that was an awful trade that did not help them last season. Mike Elias made the worst 1 year starting pitcher signing for 1 year in the offseason, which was Charlie Morton. He might have also made the best in Sagano. And so it's like it's so wild that he's made some home run decisions, and he's also made some of the biggest whiffs that any executive has made in terms of free agency or trades. I think the thing that people can't forget is that it's easy to just look at Mike Elias and kind of like have your start date of judging him be like when Rubenstein took over, because before then, like he wasn't going to be able to spend money with Angelos. But it can't be. You can't ignore the fact that like Yenier Cano is on this team and he was an all-star, and Mike Elias's team got that guy for nothing essentially from the Twins. And that Mike Elias traded cash considerations to Kansas City for Ryan O'Hearn, and now Ryan O'Hearn is going to be an all-star. And so like it's tough. It's tough to look at this and just go like, listen, like I said at the beginning, Mike Elias deserves all of the heat for this bad start, and he is the one that is most to blame, maybe aside from just the collective group of players. But when you have had the success to get this team to where they were in 23 and 24, I would expect him to get the opportunity from the ownership group to get the team out of the hole that he has partially put them in, if that makes sense. So he's going to have an opportunity at the deadline to trade some guys and maybe build up this farm system a little bit. And he's going to have an opportunity with potentially a lot of money to spend this offseason. And he does not really have a choice other than to invest, particularly in this pitching staff. And if he does, there's going to be a good amount. I know it's hard to see now, but there's going to be a good amount of optimism about this team going into 2026. If Mike Elias goes out there and legitimately signs a couple of players to long-term contracts and maybe even extends a player who's currently on the team. But whether that happens, I really don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there. Obviously, we're still a short while away from the trade deadline, but we're getting into that season now where talk is starting to ramp up. A player who most of us on the pod, well, I think all of us on the pod are huge fans of, and the Orioles community out here in the UK and in Europe are massive fans of him. Cedric Mullins. it's not a conversation that I want to have because I worship that guy. Obviously, he's been through it all with the organisation. But when you look at it on paper, you're probably looking at it, if you want to extend Cedric Mullins 4 years, 56 million. Obviously, his qualifying offer is going to be about 25, 26 million. So do the organisation and Mike Elias trade him, get a good return from the deal, and obviously Cedric will go on and get a multi-year deal anyway. And obviously you've got Bradfield, Beavers to come up probably next year, and I think they will probably take Laureano's 6.5 million option. Does it make sense now to trade him? I'm interested on your thoughts about the situation with Cedric Mullins, and what do you think happens?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the deadline because it's not as simple as I think some people think it is in terms of, hey, just trade just trade everybody, right? And for a couple of reasons. One, I think it would be smart for them to at least try to be competitive in the second half, even if they're out of it, because you do want some positive momentum going into the offseason. I do think that that is a real thing. I don't think it would be good for this group of players to lose 100 games. And if this team doesn't get back on track in the next couple of weeks, and then they trade 8 players at the deadline, that might be what happens. And I don't think that that's good for this team in terms of its morale. I think you want to end the season hot and um and go into next year with some confidence. Now, with that said, you do have to make sound baseball decisions, and trading, if you're not in it, trading some of these guys would be sound baseball decisions. One thing that you mentioned, of course, is that the qualifying offer is a pretty sticky thing here that could prevent them from trading some of these guys. And so I'm not exactly sure what the calculations are, but I, I'm not saying it's not a guarantee that Cedric Mullins gets over $50 million in free agency, but I would say it's more likely than not that he gets a 3-year contract. And if he gets 3 years, he's probably going to get $50+ million. And he might even get a 4-year contract. So if he gets that contract, the compensatory pick that the Orioles would get in return, they would give him the qualifying offer. He signs elsewhere for whatever. The comp pick that they would get would be essentially a very late first round pick, somewhere in the 30s. That is a very valuable pick. That's where they picked Jordan Westburg. Okay. Right. That's not nothing. Like, that is, I don't know
Yeah.
what they certainly have the number, like somewhere in the warehouse. Sig's calculator has a number where it says that that pick is worth X dollars. If they can get at the trade deadline, if they can get a return that is worth definitely more than whatever the value of that comp pick is, then they might do it. I'm really not sure if that's the case. I mean, is a team going to give up, more than whatever that pick would be worth to get 2 months of Cedric Mullins? I'm not sure. It's also worth noting that it's rare for this to happen. You can trade away a player at the deadline and still sign him in the offseason. And so when I look at it with Mullins in particular, I don't see the Orioles giving him a 4-year contract. I don't see them giving him a 3-year contract. But we have already seen some of the regression from him. He had a great April and a sort of a tough month of May. What he's been since 2022 is a league average hitter and a good but not great defensive center fielder. Okay. That's a valuable player, but it is not a star player. And so if it is possible for them to get Mullins on like a 2-year deal in the offseason, which I don't think will happen, but if it is possible, I think the Orioles could be interested in that, because of the fact that when you look at the outfield prospects, you mentioned Bradfield, you mentioned Beavers. I don't think Beavers isn't a center fielder, and Bradfield I don't think is going to be ready in 2026. So I do think that there could be some value in the Orioles keeping Mullins if that is at all possible. But like I said, the qualifying offer makes this pretty interesting when it goes to trading all of these guys, because I think it's reasonable that you could give all 4 of them the qualifying offer in the offseason and get picks back in return for them. And so that'll be something that they have to really look at. And then one last point about trading these guys. One way to get more value in trading these guys is if you trade them now. And I think it's too early to just wave the white flag on this season, but we're getting close to the point that it's not too early to wave the white flag on this season. And so if you want to maximize the value that you're going to get for say Zach Eflin and Cedric Mullins, trading them sooner rather than later, particularly with those guys who have some injury histories, trading them before they maybe land on the injured list, might behoove them.
That's interesting. Let's see what happens. You mentioned just before we came on air that you're Baltimore born and bred. So you have a really good insight into the fan culture. I'm interested, from your perspective, how's the fan base evolved over the years, where we've turned into a relatively successful team until this season? What have you seen the change in terms of the fans?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. It's actually something I think about a ton. So I was a fan of this team as a kid growing up. Um, I was so I'm almost 30 years old, and so I was in high school when they got good in 2012. And then I was in college in 2014 and 2016. Um, and so I was a pretty big Orioles fan up until I sort of graduated college, and then the team wasn't that good. And people can judge me if they want, but the rebuild started, and I was sort of like, you know what, I have a fiance and I have a career, and I'm not going to waste my time uh, watching a ball club that's losing 100 plus games, that's intentionally losing 100 plus games. And so I sort of stopped being a fan then, fully expecting to be a fan again in once the team got good. And then I ended up getting this job before the team got good. And so, I had been separated from being a fan for a little bit, which is good for my job, right? To think of being sort of objective in covering the team, that I have the history, I have the knowledge of the history of this organization and the fan base, et cetera, without having the attachment of being a fan for a little bit. Um, but the in terms of the fan base right now, I think when you start a rebuild, one of the things that you have to understand as a front office and as an organization is that you are signing essentially a social contract with your fan base, which is that, um, hey, we're going to intentionally be bad for several years, but when we get good, oh boy, it's going to be great, you know? And we're going to go all in, and we're going to win championships, and we're going to do everything we can. And they did that for 2 years. It didn't work out in the playoff. That's the way the sport goes. And then now they're one of the worst teams in baseball. And so I think the reason that the fan base right now is as angry as it is because of the fact that the organization is essentially, in my mind, breaking their social contract with the fan base. Because if you are going to put your fan base through that painful of a rebuild after the team had already been bad for most of the previous 3 decades, if you're going to do that, it better work. And whether this is going to work, I'm not so sure. And frankly, it has worked worse than other rebuilds of the same era. It is worse than Kansas City's rebuild, and it is worse than Arizona's rebuild. And so you're going to be the third best rebuild of the 2020s after you lost 100 plus games in 2018, 2019, and 2021. And the only reason you didn't do it in 2020 was because of the pandemic. That's a tough pill to swallow for this fan base, um, after they kind of sat through all of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's really good to get someone at the coalface with that history as well, and the way you term it in terms of social contract. I'm a bit of an amateur psychologist myself, so I love that they've essentially, reneged on that clause, so to speak. So yeah, it makes me think of it in a different way. Thank you. This isn't supposed to be in any way provocative or emotive, this question, but I wonder, because I understand that you've covered the Nats in a previous life as well. I just wonder what's the sort of one thing that stands out between covering the Nats and covering the O's. And probably a bit of a difficult question, but I just wonder, is there something sort of quintessentially different amongst the organizations, from your perspective covering them as a journalist?
Yeah. So the just a quick disclaimer. I did cover the Nationals. I wasn't, to go back to our definition earlier, I wasn't quote unquote on the beat, but I covered the team enough, and I was at home games and whatnot. Um, and so there are two differences. The fan base for the Nationals is quite different than the Orioles fan base. The Orioles fan base, like I had said, has kind of just this bubbling like frustration about the way that this team has been for 4 decades, and the mismanagement from ownership and all of these things. The Nationals fan base doesn't really have that, right? It's a pretty new fan base. There was frustrations that they didn't have a team, and there's been frustrations about the Masson thing. But after about 5 years of being really bad, the team got pretty good for a little bit, and then won a World Series. So that's one difference. And the second difference is an interesting part about covering the Orioles is that they run a pretty tight ship in terms of their PR department and the front office and all of those things. And um, it's it's an interesting way to think about. Um, it's very different in terms of dealing with the players and the people in the front office here as it was there.
Okay, thank you.
Again, this isn't like a provocative one. It's something that intrigues me, and it was a question that we received from one of the other hosts, Grant. He asked whether you think the media, especially home team media, get too comfortable with the teams, and is there more room for them to be more critical of both the playing elements and front office elements?
That's a good question. I think and I was this way when I was a fan. I think a lot of fans look at it that way because they want their frustrations that they have about the team portrayed in the questions that are being asked to players and to the manager. And I totally get that. But there isn't really a ton of utility in me asking Tony Manzolino the most difficult, like the sort of provocative questions. I think my thing that I want is to understand the thinking of the organization and the players, and to find some sort of truth in the way that they view the game and why decisions were made. And so I do think there is a time um, to be. I think it is totally worthy to be more critical if you look at the top down of an organization. So I think being hypercritical of David Rubenstein, the billionaire owner of the team, Mike Elias, the person who is essentially the face of the organization, and then to the manager of making decisions. I think all of those things are fair. I also think it's important to recognize that the players, um, that these are extraordinary people doing extraordinary things, and that all of those players are better at their careers than any of us are at ours. And I think it's important to recognize that fact, and that playing baseball is an extremely difficult thing. And so, what utility is there? Heston Kjerstad didn't catch a fly ball last night that he should catch. Is there, a massive benefit of us going into the clubhouse after the game and grilling him about, why he didn't catch that ball? He needs to be asked the question, but does it need to be asked in a way that is hypercritical? I don't think so.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Jacob. Right, well, we're going to finish very quickly now on a few rapid fire questions. So just 1 or 2 word answers. We're just going to get right off the cuff, as so to speak, and get some instinctive answers from you, and then we'll finish things off. So thank you in advance, and thank you for joining us. So here we go. If you could bring back one former Oriole to help this team, who would it be?
Oh God, one former Oriole to help this team.
In their prime, not Jim Palmer now.
I don't know. The rotation's been pretty bad. Jim can probably still throw it. Listen, the easy answer is Earl Weaver, right? Like they don't have a manager right now. I think a lot of people recognize they need somebody who has some might to them, a true baseball man that can get the most out of this team. Although there aren't really managers like Earl Weaver anymore. So I'm gonna stick to sort of the modern era. I know this is rapid fire and I'm breaking the rules, but I'll honestly I'll go with Adam Jones. I think this team is missing an Adam Jones type figure, both in the clubhouse, in the community. I don't think it can be understated how important he was to those teams, and guys like that don't come around often. But I think that'd probably be my answer.
Okay. All orange team strip. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
The all orange uniforms?
Yeah.
Oh, they're great. Yeah, thumbs up.
I love them too.
Well, they're supposed to be ugly. That's the point.
I love it.
It's a bit. We're all in on the joke. They're supposed to be ugly. That's the point.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Europe?
I have not been to Europe. My wife has been once or twice, I think.
Okay.
I have not been.
Where would you choose first?
Should I just ingratiate myself and just say where you guys are? Yeah. I go to UK.
Correct. Okay, two more quick ones. So, do you have any teams across other sports? Who are they? if you're
Did I
allowed to
root for?
disclose them. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big Ravens fan. That's probably one of the last teams that I'm a fan of, again, since I don't have a baseball team. And then I grew up a Notre Dame fan, college football. Um, and so I'm sort of a bandwagon fan with them though. So like if they're like 5-0, I'm all in. Like I'm not gonna watch it to be, but if they're good, like I'm all in. And like if they lose, like it's gonna ruin my entire weekend. But then if they lose like the first game of the season, like I'm out. Like I'm not even gonna know who's on the team. They had a great year this past year, so yeah, it'd be those two teams. Same goes for the Ravens. If they lose like a playoff game, it's like
Brilliant. And one really important rapid fire question that is sort of to the, it's really at the heart of baseball, really. But what do you put on your hot dog?
oh, that's a good question.
And it's a very personal question. You might not feel comfortable disclosing the answer, but we're here to delve. We're trying to take some of your journalistic prowess and ask the questions that really matter. You know.
So I know that for many people, that there is a wrong answer to this question. And again, if I wanted to lie and just, make myself seem, more of an adult than I am, then I would probably say just mustard and maybe some relish on that. And I feel like that's an answer that would make most people happy. Sadly, that is not my answer. My answer is I do put ketchup on my hot dog, and so it is ketchup and mustard, but not a ton. I don't want it getting all over the place. I don't. The people that that put, it's like the kids who put a ton of, like, they have a plate of fries and then they squirt the ketchup all over the fries
Yeah.
instead of dipping.
No.
Like those people, we need to like have those kids like psychologically evaluated before they become adults.
I say this about ketchup users. People who have that amount of ketchup on things are future serial killers, and they will feature in a Netflix documentary, like an Untold.
The ketchup killers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a radio show in Baltimore that they joke that if I'm a serial killer because I have my middle name, and they say that the people who that go by three names are just are like either they shoot presidents or they're serial killers. But no, I think the ketchup thing is real. Like the people who put ketchup on their eggs, like I really think that needs to be. I think that needs to be looked at. I think we need to get like Interpol on that. Like all these countries need to get together and take a look at these people, because I had a friend in college, one of my best friends. He put hot sauce on everything, and like popcorn. He put hot sauce on popcorn, and which is
Okay.
actually funny because he is a mental health professional. So I'm starting to question whether he's qualified for that role.
Well,
His eating habits. So.
Well, thank you, Jacob. It's been a pleasure. We got to the heart of the matter and asked the questions that really matter. So, but thank you for the insight. It's been wonderful to have you on, and I hope you've enjoyed it too.
No, it's been a blast, guys. I appreciate you having me on. I'll come on anytime.
Cheers.
Thank you very
much, Jacob. Appreciate it. Thank
And
you.
thanks for listening, everyone. Cheers.
Bye now.
That's it for this episode of O's Across the Pond, bringing Birdland to Europe one episode at a time. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow along as we keep the Orioles conversation going from this side of the Atlantic. Until next time, stay loud, stay proud, and let's go O's!